Oh, look who it is. It's Joyce Maynard. Joyce, how are you feeling on this fine day?
Oh, it's dangerous to ask me how I'm feeling,
Oh,
Bill.
okay. All
I,
right.
I'm so in touch with my feelings. I'm feeling
Good.
good. Feeling
You're
good.
feeling good.
I'm really excited. I have to say, this is my 12th novel and I think my 20th book, but I have never been more excited about a book coming out.
Really?
So I'm thrilled. Yes, that's really true. I don't have a favorite any more than I have a favorite of my children,
Right.
but this book feels like the culmination of a very long career. I'm not saying it's over, but um, so yeah, I just can't wait to
Well,
put it in the hands of readers and hear what they have to say. I always feel that my books are just half of a conversation, and the reader provides the other half. Well,
let's see
you are providing the other half at the moment. And I just want to have that conversation.
that I love everything you're saying. I agree with it 100%. I always tell my students, you start the book and then somebody else finish. Your readers have to finish the book in a
Yeah.
way. Like,
Yes, exactly.
you know,
And it doesn't always land the way you think, which,
no,
that's okay too. I don't want to control the reader's universe.
can't can't even if you wanted to.
No.
Right. They do with it what don't you think I teach a class. The class I like to teach is called Fearless Writing. It's about the emotional challenges of writing. So
Right.
it's just all the psychological,
Right.
right? It's which I think is the big thing. And I think
Mhm.
where a lot of the trouble starts for writers, although I do kind of want to get into your biography because you have such an unusual, like you have so been steeped in writing your whole life, like adult life. It's really crazy. It's crazy. But like one of the things people have to deal with is the fact that you write this thing in the supreme privacy of your imagination, and then you give it over, and your control is gone. It's
Right.
over. And you
It is.
do you ever
It,
get have you ever
it's
gotten
actually
used to
a
it?
little bit like parenthood.
Yes, yes.
We briefly, live under the illusion that we're in charge of them. Ha. Um, so I put out my story, make of it what you will,
Yeah.
and I'm really interested to hear back.
Good. Oh, such a healthy attitude. And I love that you called a conversation. I think when people are afraid of marketing their work, which is, it's a big thing, particularly now,
Yeah.
I encourage them to look upon it as a conversation, an invitation to a conversation. Like if you're at a big party, over here, we're talking about sports. Over here, we're talking about politics. Over here, we're talking about feminism. Over here, we're talking about fantasy. Not like, what's the conversation you want to have? You know?
Well, I want to have a conversation about families.
Okay.
Been an obsession of mine over my life. At different stages, I saw it differently. One of my obsessions was to be part of a happy family.
Uh-huh.
I, and I kind of felt like the only way I could accomplish that would be to give birth to it. So I married young and just couldn't wait to, have babies, which was
Yeah.
totally out of step with, young women of my generation who were all about career. And I
Right.
was like happy family, happy family. And then the marriage did not survive. It bore three children and a lot of history and experience and feeling. Um, and then I thought I had failed. I didn't make the happy family because it didn't look like my idea
How,
of
how
what.
old how old were you? If you don't mind me asking. How old
No,
were
I don't.
you? I'm
I
sure
was
you've written about it all, but
What have I not written about? I was 23 when I got married, 24 when my daughter was born.
wow.
I
Wow.
turned 70 last November. I've been
Wow.
publishing my work longer than I've done any other thing, including be my parents' daughter, be married, live with my children. I have been telling stories for well over 50 years. And
Crazy. It's
and the
crazy.
stories, the subjects and the obsessions like Happy Family don't change. I mean, some of them, you outgrow. I'm not obsessed with having babies anymore, but but I've changed. And
Yeah.
so I think I, you know, the this book is the second of you don't have to have read the first book to read this one, but it comes out of a novel that I published a few years ago called Count the Ways, that told the story of a family, a character, the central character, not me, but she's exactly my age during
Right.
all moments. So that, when she meets the man that she will eventually marry, she's, the Vietnam War has just ended. And I mean, there's lots of sort of things going on in America in the background, which we
Right.
might talk about because that's important to me. Um, and she has babies when I had babies. She lives on a farm when I lived on a farm. Her marriage falls apart when my marriage fell
Right.
apart. And I put in it everything that I would have liked to read and know and explore when I was younger. I
Oh,
think, you pay dearly for being this age, obviously, and a lot of losses come along the way and things that you miss about being younger, but you sure get, I mean, it's kind of crazy if you don't get any wisdom out of it. And so this is everything I have to say just about marriage and relationships between men and women and parents and children and growing older and love and forgiveness. No big surprise, it's a long book.
yeah. Yeah.
Those are a lot of topics to cover. And I've written about those things, but at different ages. So this is
Yeah.
what I know now that I didn't necessarily know before.
Yeah. You know, I'm a little younger than you, but not that much. And I will say, um, I don't want to be any younger. I mean, there are things I could do when I was
Mhm.
25 that I suppose I can't do now. But I honestly, I wouldn't want to go back a day because to me, um, my suffering, I still suffer, but
Mhm.
really what I have learned, it happens for much smaller periods of time because of what I feel I've learned. And I've so
Oh,
much better
oh,
grasp on,
yes.
you know,
I like that. I don't entirely not want to suffer,
no,
suffering.
no,
You
it's,
only suffer when you feel deeply, and
yeah.
I wouldn't miss out on the feeling part. So, um, uh, yeah, I bring a lot of, I sometimes weep when I write. I
Do
sometimes
you? That's
laugh. I
great.
do. I
That's
do.
good.
And my goal is to make you weep,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
you read. And uh, I felt a real sense of accomplishment. Richard Russo said that he cried 3 times when he read this book.
Ah, you made Richard Russo cry. Good,
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
Well,
So I wanted to follow characters over a long period of time. The first novel goes from the 70s to 2009, and
yeah,
I didn't imagine that there was going to be a sequel. I felt I told this story, and I never had written a sequel before. I was going to be on to the next. And then I started hearing from so many readers who said, "You can't leave us there. What happened
really.
to her now?" Yeah. And some of them are angry too. They've said, this woman has sacrificed, she's taken care of everybody but herself, which is what women often do.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm not portraying the world as we'd like it to be. It's the world as it often is.
sure, sure.
Um, and they said, we don't want you to leave her in this place. And so I gave it a lot of, I think I waited a full year to start writing this book because I wanted to think what I wanted to give to this character, Eleanor, what
Right.
would give to myself. Um, and one of the things about writing a novel as opposed to living your life is you have a little more control over what's going to happen.
Oh.
Uh, just a little, not necessarily all. I'm always surprised by things that end up happening in my books, but
Good,
um,
good.
I knew I didn't just want some great guy to come along and make everything okay.
Yeah, well,
I did want a love affair, and I gave her one,
yeah.
but not that wasn't the ultimate
You
accomplishment.
can't, I will say this. I've been married for a long time. And
Mhm.
I always say the choice to, and I'm sure, and I pursued this person at a young age. Like I left California to be with her. Uh,
Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. It
So
goes,
this is
it goes
your
back to high
original
school.
wife, your original wife.
My only wife. Yep.
Hmm.
And I saw her in high school, fell in love, and it just the whole thing.
Oh,
It's a story, and I've
wow.
written about it. And I love it. But I always said that I think of the moment I was like, yeah, I'm going to go as like the decision against which other decisions are measured. And I know it sounds romantic, but what I meant is like that's what it feels like when you choose something that's right for you. Like things
Wow.
should feel that right, you
Yeah.
know. And that I knew at 20, well, really at 18, like that's it, that's it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is
Amazing.
kind of. I mean, think about your 18-year-old kid saying, "Mom, he's the one, she's the one." Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
we'll
yeah.
see.
Yeah.
But I
And
knew.
do what I was doing when I was 18, and it wasn't a very, it didn't endure very well. Um, so good. Wow. What
Well,
amazing.
but you know what's interesting to me about I mentioned earlier because I've interviewed a lot of writers, but every once in a while, and you're one, I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know about you until you come across my
Great, great. I love
right,
it. That
right.
I just, there are sort of things that, the
I
Google version.
Oh yes, oh yes, and I Googled because that's what I
And,
do, you know.
yeah, sure. And that doesn't really define me. So, we can get it over with. It's not that I start,
Well,
itching and drooling when you mention it, but I have this, identity
I
that
know.
does not define my whole life, but was
Good.
a chapter in my life, and that certainly has haunted me in all kinds of ways.
The,
So I'll just say it. I'll just say it rather than be coy.
okay, because
When
I
I
have a
wrote,
question that has nothing to do with that, but you go ahead and say it.
okay, or we don't have to talk about, well,
Well, a little, just a tiny bit, but
okay,
it's not my
okay,
interest.
okay. So I'd been writing like forever. I learned to
Yes.
type when I was 3, and
Yeah.
so it's not that this launched my career.
Right.
I was already writing, but and writing for 17 and doing these. But when I was a freshman at Yale, very ambitious, wanted to sort of get out. I grew up in a small town, New Hampshire, wanted to see the world, get to New York City. I wrote an article for the New York Times magazine. I wrote a letter to the editor-in-chief, said I should write for you. And he said, okay, and gave me an assignment to write about the only subject I was really equipped to write about, which was me.
Right.
It was an article called, I missed the irony of this entirely, An 18-year-old Looks Back on Life, published in the spring of 1972, more than 50 years ago. Picture of me on the cover wearing my blue jeans, full color magazine. And overnight, my life changed. And I got over 1,000 letters, offers
Right.
to go on TV, go on the radio, audition for The Exorcist, didn't get the part. And among the many things that happened, one overshadowed all others,
Yeah.
which was that I got a letter from J.D. Salinger.
Yeah.
I was the one person on the Yale campus probably who hadn't read Catcher in the Rye,
Right.
and we embarked on a correspondence that was, really like Holden Caulfield was writing just to me and telling me I was the most
Wow.
wonderful girl,
Yeah.
most wonderful writer, most perfect person. And it was pretty heady stuff. And I dropped out of college, gave up my full scholarship at Yale to move in with him and be with him forever, was how, an
Right.
18-year-old.
Sure. Sure.
And he really was my religion. And during that time, I wrote the first book that I would ultimately publish, a memoir that somehow never got around to mentioning that I was living with Salinger. And and about 3 weeks before that book was published, he put two $50 bills in my hands on a trip to Florida and said, "Go back to the house, clear out your things, be gone."
Right. Right.
And now, if a man treated me that way, I would definitely think less of the man, but I just thought less of myself. I have
Sure.
failed.
Well, you were a kid. You were a kid.
And I kept that secret for a very long time. I was asked about it, but I
Yeah.
was known, but until I published my memoir, At Home in the World,
Right.
at which point the world, the literary world, rose up to condemn me almost universally. I was called a predator in the pages of the New York Times.
Wow. See, I
Um,
didn't know any of that at all. When was that published?
it was published in 1998. It's
See,
not ancient
I might have
history.
read about it, kind of. It
That's
might have
what
come.
people did. They didn't
Right.
read the book, they read about it. And so they
Yeah.
said, oh, she wrote the book about Salinger.
Right.
No,
She's
I
this.
wrote to write a book about Salinger. I wrote a book about me, and he chose to be.
Oh, right.
So that is one piece of my story, but one only.
Right.
I've
And
published 20 books. That's the only one that he appears in. And it's still, I know that on the day of my death, my obituary will
no,
be,
no,
she lived with Salinger.
no, 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 screw that. Doesn't have to be. I did find that interesting, I have to admit. But the part that actually got my attention the most was like, oh my God, you're 18 and your literary career explodes because that is that it starts, you're like out of the gate, kaboom, and you're living in the world of writing in a way, right? You're so young.
I was raised in a boot camp of writing. My mother was a
Oh,
brilliant woman and a deeply gifted woman, grew up, poor in the Depression, Russian immigrant Jewish parents.
oh,
And
okay.
she did not get to have the career she deserved. She had a
Right,
PhD from Radcliffe and nobody would hire her. And so wife and mother of the 50s. So
right,
she raised her daughters, me and my sister, to have the life she didn't get to have. And we did. We both became writers. And I felt this huge obligation to earn the acknowledgement and success that she deserved and
right.
had not. So yes, I was driven less for me than for her, and I was publishing and sending off proposals, and it was years before I got to the point of enjoying writing.
When did it happen? Do you remember the first
I
book or
yes,
first,
I do. It was my novel Baby Love.
which was
It was my
book number
first, I
what?
was a bad girl. It was my first novel. And it was
Oh,
very dark and darkly sexual. And I
yeah,
had been this sort of perky youth spokesperson of America.
right.
And suddenly I write this book that somebody like me was not supposed to write. It's a real favorite of mine, Baby Love. I was 26 and I wrote it in this white heat of just, I wrote it in 10 days. I didn't know how
What? What?
sustain it. I tend to do that. I write fast once I write.
Okay,
I
okay.
have, I bet somebody listening to this will already have identified that I have ADHD, and I have extreme ADHD, which has made some problems in my life, but also gives me a great gift,
But
which is
I,
hyper focus.
yeah, see, here's the thing. I'm going to push back. I know you've got this diagnosis, whatever, but I've got to live with people with diagnoses. It's been a big part of my life. Okay, not mine personally, but the people I love. And so I feel like, look, there is a strength to everything has its strength, and it's
Mhm.
just like you happen to be focused in this way. And I always think with people with ADHD, and I feel like half my clients say, okay, first, just so you know, I have ADHD, so we're gonna before we can work. It's just like maybe you get it's almost like I need to be interested and I get bored and my mind wants to go
I actually think
right,
this part of the story of my writing. I write for a person like me. I have to keep you interested.
right.
Hold on to you. I didn't actually find out, people my age were not
There's
tested.
no such thing.
So I didn't, and I used to hear about it in my kids' world, and I thought, oh, it's just an excuse for not doing your.
Right.
And then I went, my very good second husband died 8 years ago.
Oh, sorry.
And I decided to go back to college. I went back to
Yeah,
Yale.
I was reading about that.
Hi. And it was in my first semester back at Yale, my very first exam that I'd taken in 46 years or whatever, that my French teacher, I thought I did really well. I had been a good student. I thought I, got an A or at least an A minus. She gives me back my exam and it's D minus, a letter I'd never seen before. And she said words that changed my life. She said, have you ever been tested for ADHD? And
Wow.
I was found to be in the 17th percentile for reading. Reading is really hard for me.
Do you get bored? Do you get
I
distracted?
just, I get, it's not even bored. I'm never bored. There's so many thoughts that start coming at me. And so I read really slowly.
Yeah.
I love short stories. Alice Munro's death this week felt very
Oh, I
strongly.
didn't know she died. I missed that. I don't know how.
Delivered the news. Yeah.
I missed it. Okay. All right.
And so short stories I love because they are
Gotcha.
short. I mean, they're also
Yeah.
Alice Munro,
Yeah.
but a novel is a very hard thing for me to read because every time I stop, I have to start all over again at the beginning.
You
So
forgot?
So
Seriously?
I do. I do. I can't stop. And that's true for writing too. I have to sort of be in my zone and then I can't come out of my zone until I'm done.
Right.
So my books, I think, I often get a letter from somebody saying, I don't usually read very much, but I couldn't stop reading your book. And I
So
think I think I connect with people who have a little bit of that kind of thing, and I can hold on to them. I write a book that I would like to read.
as well you should. As well we all should. I love that you see this is a thing. This is why I get a little crazy when I hear people talk about mental challenges or mental health because I feel like even
Opportunities, yeah.
yeah, because like, okay, so you're reading and all these thoughts come in. Well, that's okay. Like thoughts, interesting thoughts are good too. And if they come
Yeah.
while reading, well, so be it. I know it'd be, if you're taking classes, you gotta read, but
Yeah.
in outside of that, thoughts are,
I
ideas
have
are good things.
learned, I have learned I have to be deeply engaged. And if I'm deeply engaged, the house could be on fire and I wouldn't notice it.
Wow.
I was
Yeah.
running around the house the other day. A carpenter was working at my house and he suddenly said, Joyce, there's blood gushing out of your toe. And I hadn't noticed I'd ripped my toenail off,
Ooh,
but I was so into my thing that I was doing that I just hadn't even noticed. Anyway, uh,
wow.
this family consumed me
The family in, wait,
in
just
in
want
this
to show
book.
my, there,
And
there it is.
yes,
There it
that's
is. There it is.
that painting incidentally, um,
Yeah.
my publishers kept on sending me pictures of little cozy farmhouses that look like
Yeah.
Thomas
Yeah.
Kincaid art. And I just knew it, I didn't want it. And then I looked on my own wall and there was that painting, which was made by a friend of mine.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's actually a painting of my own bedroom in my house in New Hampshire.
Really?
And
Wow.
it's not so bleak as that, but
Right.
it's a bed that one person sleeps in.
Right.
And I I felt as if and the light is coming in the window a little bit, but it's not blazing glorious sunshine. And it felt like my character's life, that she's been through a lot and the sheets are kind of tumbled, but she has survived. And it comes obviously from a Leonard Cohen song.
Yeah.
the first,
Yeah.
the first half of that two-part
Famous,
phrase
beautiful quote. Yeah.
um, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, it's about finding beauty in imperfection,
Yeah.
not dream of a family, but the reality of a kind of messy family where, people screwed up and hurt each other and broke each other's hearts, but not quite. They survived and carried on. And resilience is a big part of what I wanted to explore, and forgiveness of our trespasses, and
Oh,
as
yes.
forgive those
Oh,
who
yes.
trespass against us. So what was I saying? Lost my train.
You were talking about you're talking about the
Family.
family.
Yeah. So I I will never run out of material because there's always more families, more stories. And it's my job to, what I love is not just telling the stories I know, but exploring the stories that I don't know yet. And in the act of telling them, I'll figure them out. There's a
Yeah.
character in How the Light Gets In. He's not one of the major characters. He's the husband of one of the adult children in the family, Jake, and he's devoted to his wife. He's
Right.
a basketball coach at a high school, loses his job, starts getting really angry, follows Donald Trump, kind of who taps into his anger. And he becomes he goes to the Capitol on January
Yeah.
6th,
Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to make him this cardboard cutout of, stupid badness.
Right.
Was some of that for sure, but I wanted to imagine, and I had to work really hard to do that, but I think I did, to locate compassion for this guy. How did that happen? Where did that
Right.
come from?
Right.
And that to me is the big adventure. And it'll never get old because
Yeah.
always somebody else coming down the path.
When I'm writing, And if I'm not feeling at all inspired about what I'm about to do, because often I write a lot about creativity and the link between spirituality and creativity. That's sort of one of my sweet spots. But it's a lot of the same stuff. And
Mhm.
if I'm starting to feel a little uninspired, what I think about is the feeling of discovery, the feeling of not knowing and going forward and then learning. That's without it,
Absolutely.
I just wouldn't write. Like there's no,
No,
that's
it's
all the
not
fun.
saying what you already know.
No.
Then it's just almost like doing a, transcript.
Yeah.
But it's discovering what you didn't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and going into familiar rooms and noticing something that you never saw before.
Yeah.
In yeah.
How do you, so you've written, okay, I'm trying to, wait, you probably can't, maybe you can say off the top of your head. Okay, so you've written 5 nonfiction, like a dozen fiction, dozen novels, maybe? What are we on number?
I think
Oh,
so. I think this is
okay.
number 12. Yeah.
Do you, when you say, okay, my next project, do you, what, you seem like such an intuitive person. Maybe it's impossible to
I,
even ask. How do you choose
I
the next?
very often the day before I write a book, I couldn't tell you what that book was going to be. That was true of my novel To Die For, which probably, in terms of sort of like sales and, movie deal was the most successful book. To Die For, the day before, I was going to, my marriage had ended.
Right,
I, my children, I had fallen in love. I was passionately in love with this
right,
man, and my children had gone off for 3 weeks to be with their father in a summer vacation, and I was going to go off with the man.
right,
I would have been 36 years old. And then the day before I was to go there, the day my children left, I broke up with the man.
but
He broke
you're
up.
passionately in love with him.
And I was, and I had these 3 precious weeks with no children. I adored my children, but 3 weeks without
Yeah,
children. And
nice.
I actually made a very conscious decision. Okay, if I'm going to be miserable, I should at least be productively miserable. And I
Okay.
also kind of wanted to leave the world. So the best way I know to leave the world is to create
Yeah,
a novel on the
yeah,
page. And I had no clue what the book was going to be. But that happened to be the day that a woman named Pamela Smart was arrested for conspiring with her 15-year-old lover to murder her husband in New Hampshire. That's where I lived. And she had been on TV for a couple of weeks saying, if anybody knows anything about this crime, please come forward and tell us. She was very telegenic. She wanted to be on TV.
right,
And I knew I did not want to be a reporter. I had been a newspaper reporter. I didn't want to try to get the story of Pamela
right.
Smart. Boy, I wouldn't have gotten to the truth that way. I wanted to create a work of fiction that helped me imagine. I remember sitting there thinking, what inspires a 15-year-old boy to kill a man point blank that he's never even met? No
Yeah,
money involved. And and it was in my pursuit of the answer to that I imagined the drug of sex with this woman, this 25-year-old woman, and
right.
her saying, we can be together if my husband just gets out of the way. Anyway, I for the remaining the 2.5 weeks that my children were gone, I didn't stop working, and I finished To Die For,
Yeah.
and sold it to the movies. But more importantly, it made a really good movie. That's Nicole Kidman at her absolute best, To Die For, and Joaquin Phoenix, Matt Dillon.
Wow.
But
How did I miss this movie? How did I miss?
you didn't know Alice Munro died. You
Why
didn't
didn't
know.
I know? Well, I live in my own bubble, I guess.
But you can play the guitar, you see.
That's right. Play my
Uh,
guitar and just be happy.
So, it is not a book about Pamela Smart.
Right,
It's a book actually about the obsession. It's always obsession with sex, obsession with being famous, obsession.
right.
It's and that was me trying to find answers to questions.
Isn't that what we're always doing? I mean, isn't that, or I should say, I hope that's what I'm always doing. If I don't have a question burning in me and I'm
Mhm.
writing anyway, then there's always like, I will sometimes say to myself, Bill, are you actually interested in what you're like? Like, is this interesting?
Oh,
And if you're not, like, because sometimes the answer is
not
like, no,
forget
I'm
it.
not. I'm not.
Every now and then, in the old days, I was a single parent. I supported my children and me by writing. So, it wasn't always like coming from, the depths of my
Right,
soul.
right.
But every now and then I would fall asleep at my
Yeah, yeah,
computer. And that was a really bad sign. If I'm
yes.
falling asleep at my own words, who else is going to be interested? So I have to always be able to hop up and, you know, run around or jump in a lake, or I'm often near bodies of water when I write.
There's a,
Um,
I know I was talking to a very, very, very successful writer of nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, who said, "Yeah, I always fall asleep at my desk when I'm writing." I'm like, I was going to say something, except he's doing fine, but Jesus,
yeah,
I thought if you're falling asleep, maybe
yeah,
you need
yeah.
to mix things up a
No,
little.
I don't believe in writing that comes that place in you. I want to be so excited I can hardly stand it. I want to be so
Oh,
excited that my toenail will rip off and blood will be gushing and I won't even notice it. That's
oh,
how,
you're living
and I
life.
was that excited. I wrote this book, How the Light Gets In. I have this little house in New Hampshire where I go. But it has no insulation, no central heat. And so usually I only can go there in the summer, but I wanted to be really alone and nobody bother me. So I was there writing this book in November. It was
Oh,
cold. It was very cold.
Jesus, in
I had a
New
fire
Hampshire.
going and I was bundled up and I had a little, propane heater, but it was cold. But there was a kind of intensity that came from writing it that way. I'm playing my music, not while I
Yeah.
write, before I write, and burning my candles and building my wood fire. So that's mostly where I wrote this book.
Well, people, that's an excellent note. How the Light Gets In, big book, expansive book, beautiful book. Now we're recording this a month before it comes out, but when you hear or see this, it's out. So go buy it, everybody. Joyce,
Maybe come see me. I'm going to go
uh,
all around the country.
are you? Are
If
you?
people go to joycemaynard.com, that's
Yeah.
my website, that'll show them where I might
Oh,
be.
it's going to be interesting. If you've just tuned into this, you're not going to want to miss seeing Joyce live. That I'm sure is a treat. You are a treat, but I'm not done with you, Joyce.
Okay.
Quite done. I have one more question.
You want to ask me to sing. I know you do, Bill.
Grab my guitar. I wish I knew the chords to Anthem. I don't. You could
Oh,
do
that
that.
wouldn't be, I would choose Patsy Cline, but that's
Oh,
okay.
okay. No, my
Just
question is this.
it would be great. It would be great. Yeah.
This is my question. If okay, think about all the writing you've done. You've done so much freaking writing, but think about all
Yes.
the writing you've done, and if it's taught you anything about being a person, about life,
Mm-mm.
what?
It has required me to look at not just at how I feel, but how the people who have come up against me feel, and to look at things from their perspective.
Yeah,
Uh, and that I would say has been the greatest gift. That there's a character in this book who's estranged from her mother. And I couldn't just have the mother's story. I had to, even though it's her point of view, I had to imagine everybody's got a story. The way the guy who goes to the Capitol, to tear down, to climb up the walls has a story. I wanted to see other people's stories, and that has informed my own. So yeah, it would be that.